Hello and welcome everyone. A new episode of Money Means Business. Today we do have a lot to speak about. For example, Egypt received approval on Friday from the IMF or the International Monetary Fund's Executive Board for the expanded 8 billion financial support program. Today there was an important tour or an inspection tour by Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli to a number of factories in the 10th of Ramadan city to have this direct interaction with our investors and to eliminate all obstacles on the way. We are going also to have a quick look at what was going on with the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the signing of billions of dollars projects and investment is going to flare up there. All this and more. And we do have a very special guest who is going to answer all our questions and to cover with us all the economic events we talked about, but right after the short break. Welcome back. Let's start immediately, but let me first welcome my dear guest live here in the studio, Professor Khaled Dahawy, Professor of Accounting, American University in Cairo. Thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
And let's start immediately. We do have a lot to speak about, and as I said in my intro, we are going to start with the statements which were released by the IMF. Speaking about Egypt receiving the approval from the IMF Executive Board for the expanded $8 billion financial support program. You know, sir, it was very ear-catchy and eye-catchy what I heard from His Excellency Minister of Finance, Dr. Mohammed Mait, when he called on all the economic international institutions to take into consideration the surroundings around us. The COVID-19 and the lockdowns and the Ukrainian-Russian conflicts and now the genocide, the Israeli genocide war in Gaza before evaluating the Egyptian economy. And this is exactly what was said in the statement. The difficult external environment generated by Russia's war in Ukraine was subsequently aggravated by the conflict in Gaza and Israel, as well as tension in the Red Sea. This was part of the statement regarding the Fund Executive Board statement regarding our financial support program. How do you see this, that they have taken into consideration the surroundings before any decision?
One of the most important things in making decisions in general is taking the environmental or the socioeconomic factors surrounding the environment of making a decision. Decisions are not taken in a vacuum. They have to be taken without the environment, taking all the environmental factors, political, economic, and financial. And all these big financial institutions in the world do that when they do their evaluation. They don't take them blindly just looking at one factor alone, because one factor alone is not enough to make a comprehensive evaluation. And as we can see now, the IMF has done that, a comprehensive evaluation of the situation of Egypt, looking at the hurdles that you have just mentioned, and they've been mentioned by all the institutions in the world. And I have to say that the significance of this IMF offering Egypt $8 billion is not only the amount, but actually opening the green light for the other financial institutions to offer Egypt different types of financial packages. Because it's always the IMF that takes the lead into making the decision, and then what follows are all the other financial institutions. So it was very important for Egypt, I think, to get that approval, because it not only says, here's 8 billion, but it also opens the door for many other evaluations by other financial institutions that will give Egypt different loans and different packages that allows Egypt the boost that is needed for this period of time.
And because of that, I really have this kind of relation between these statements released by the IMF and the EU delegation, which was here in Egypt, and they had this important meeting with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Ursula von der Leyen, along with other 6 EU leaders, and they signed a number of memoranda of understanding in many economic domains. And they said that this is what we call strategic partnership. It's not just a partnership. But returning back to this issue, as we were talking before being on air, of course, $8 billion, but it's not about the amount. It's about how this amount is going to be invested. I'd like to know more.
One of the most important focuses is how do you use the money that you get, because there are many, many different ways or alternatives, especially in a time where Egypt is pressured under already very high level of borrowing that results in a very high interest rate that we have to pay amounts every year. It is very easy for the Egyptian government to get to use a large portion of this amount into paying the debt. However, one of the things that we've been hearing from different of our responsible figures in Egypt, the good news is we're not going to be doing that, at least not on a large scale, but instead we're going to be using this or a large portion of this money to work on projects that help the economic status in Egypt. Helping the economic status in Egypt means opening opportunities of export, opening opportunities for receiving systematic revenues in foreign currency. And this is the biggest and most important part of the Egyptian economy that's missing. It is okay to pay your debts. It's okay to build your infrastructure, but it's also okay, and more importantly, to have part of that stream of inflow of foreign currency to build projects.
To have this stream via what?
Oh, you mean what you're borrowing
Yes.
from the world across international financial monetary
No, I
channels?
mean to invest and to guarantee the return or the short-term cycle, if
Exactly.
I can call it this way.
That's what I'm trying to get to, is that we have to get systematic inflows of foreign currency coming from projects that you invest in. And ABC Finance is you need to finance short-term loans to short-term projects. It is very dangerous to finance long-term projects using short-term or medium debt. So what is very, very important is for the Egyptian government, and I think it is understanding that, and we are now getting ourselves ready for these projects. And these projects, and I said again, a lot of foreign currency inflows, but systematic, not one-time boosts, not a single inflow, but a systematic project that produces inflows of foreign currency. And this in itself builds what's called natural hedging. If you want to hedge against your use of dollars or foreign currency, you have to have an inflow of foreign currency. This is the only way that we will be able to sustain the development in Egypt.
But this balance or this equation is not easy.
Of course. And this is why it makes it very hard, and this is why we again come back to your opening statement. You have to look at the environment. We are suffering from a very, very bad luck. We ended up with COVID, followed by the Russian, followed by the events in Gaza, which leads to problems in three big issues in Egypt. We're talking about tourism, we're talking about
Red Sea
security, and also our food, which depends mainly on flour. And we import a lot of our flour from Ukraine and the Russian place. So in a nutshell, we are under a lot of strain. It is a very hard and a very sensitive time. And the fact that the Egyptian government understands that and is willing to participate with the international foundations in finding a strategic pattern or strategic role or way that we can take, because it's not going to be resolved tomorrow. It is a strategy that needs 4, 5, 10 years to get to where we need to be.
But the most important thing is to start immediately, because we do not have the luxury of losing time.
Exactly. As you said, this is very important. The timing is very important, and it's not tomorrow. It has to be yesterday.
Sir, I'd like to focus on something because many people, I mean, I'm here not to speak to the experts. I'm speaking to the layman in the street, to people who do not know that much about economic issues, who just read the news, and sometimes they do not know how to translate them into their own language. A strong economic stabilization is being implemented to correct the policy slippages. Well, the expanded agreement was announced when Egypt's central bank hiked by interest rates by 6 percentage points and allowed the country's currency to plummet against the dollar. Tightening of fiscal monetary policy, reducing public investment, and greater space for the private sector. All this was said in the IMF statement. Many people would say, this is not an intervention into our local affairs. This is not a way that they are telling us what to do and what not to do. There's a great difference between this and between something based on scientific research, and this is a study, and this is exactly the way we can cooperate with you. Would we know the difference?
We here, if it stands for the researchers, the economists, yes.
Yeah.
We, the layman, no. I think one of the most important things is in Egypt, we all want to be, to know it all. In the world, we've learned there's nobody who knows everything.
Yeah.
You have to listen to the experts. You need to focus on paying attention to what experts in the market say. And the worst thing you can do to yourself and to your economy is always hearing things, hearing rumors, following, because we know for a fact that Egypt has been impacted and is always going to be affected by outside powers that needs or wants Egypt to fail. And at the same time, we are trying our best to streamline through a very, very chaotic international environment, as we said. So the real best way is to start listening to the experts. And to simplify what you said, it's a very simple approach. We can, if we want to simplify this for the layman in the street,
Yes.
we have a problem where there's something called the exchange rate that is based on demand and supply of our currency. Foreign currency is not the big problem. It is actually our currency where there's a problem. Because people want our currency, they demand our currency if we have something to offer. And we demand other countries when we want something from them. So in Egypt, we import a lot more than what we export. So there's always going to be an imbalance. The only solution for this structural problem is that we have to export as much as possible to meet or exceed what we import. Then we will find that there is demand for our currency. Currency becomes stronger, and we can finally see our Egyptian pound getting stronger. And therefore, as we said before, the only solution, you can look at someone like Egypt that has cancer, and we're giving it aspirin. The only way, because there's always a symptom and there's a disease. Symptoms is what you explained, where our foreign currency goes down, exchange rate of the foreign currency becomes stronger, Egyptian pounds plummets, and so on. But these are all symptoms. The main disease is, again, we need to export.
To treat the causes, not the symptoms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to treat that cause, we need to export. And
We
the
need
way
to
we
work,
export,
to work,
Exactly.
to produce,
However-
production, and
However,
then
let me tell you something that is I've learned the hard way through consulting with several Egyptian exporters. We've learned in our life in Egypt that we produce something and then we export it. The problem is you cannot do that anymore in the current international market. For you to export, you have to travel, to go to the market you want to penetrate. You have to understand the limitations of what they want and then produce what they want. And I've seen this with a glass factory here that produced glass cups, wanted to penetrate the EU market. After they built the whole thing and they got the best machines, they discovered that whatever
This
they're
is not
producing
what
is not
the
what
market-
market is requiring there,
Yeah.
that there is a degree of transparency in the glass that's required in EU that they had to build in the beginning. So it's not enough that we build, it's not enough that we produce. It is more important that you understand the demands of the outside world.
sure.
Once you understand the market that you want to penetrate, you start producing for it. And this is very, very important because they will tell you where to get the machines. They will tell you what type of raw materials you need to be using, what type of heat, and so on. So you can produce, in the case I was explaining, the degree of clearness in the glass that will be exported to the EU. Not any glass cup will be accepted in the EU. And so on and so forth. So we have to do our homework. We have to understand what the international market demands and work on supplying these niches that are out there in the market.
And to know well that it's going to be a win-win situation. I mean, simply we do have raw materials. So if you please, I'd like to show you my raw materials because I do not want to import the raw materials. I do have vocational training for my workers, so I do have the human capital. And
you've mentioned one of the most pivotal issues in Egypt. To the best of my understanding, 60% of Egyptian population is below 30 years old.
Yeah, youth.
Which means we have a lot of power. However, the problem is we have created over the years academic programs that everybody wants to get a bachelor degree. When in reality, the market does not need any more bachelor degree.
Sure.
And you touched on, I think, the key to the educational program, which is vocational training.
Yeah.
Enough doctors, engineers, which we don't need anymore, accountants, but we need carpenters, we need wheelers, we need people that work with their hands. And if we're going to start opening that, this is going to be the
We started
door
already.
for
We
Egypt.
started already. And by the way, more than once, I think tens of times, I've asked all the Egyptians to again think about the faculty of agriculture. We do need experts in agriculture when it comes to the new delta, when it comes to 1.5 million fadans reclamation, when it comes to people who can be responsible or shoulder this responsibility of our food. Then if we do have this food security and we are secured regarding our food, then we can think about anything else. Because I think we knew it the hard way. I think the whole world learned the hard way. After the grains issue, after the food oil issue, after... Sir, you know what teased me regarding this? People here in Egypt, they speak about our economic crisis. It's okay, we do have an economic crisis, and the president said it more than once. But please, Google USA shutdown and see what you're going to find. Google farmers' strikes in Poland, France, Italy, Romania, and see what's going to happen. Strikes in the medical staff in England. Strikes in the transportation field in Germany and in all Europe, and you're going to find a lot. But unfortunately, we do not focus except on what we have, not on the global economic crisis which is taking place even as we speak. If you agree with me on that.
I agree with you, but I also differ with you in one little point.
Sure.
We, for many years, were known to the basket of food for the world. If you go back, I was watching a documentary on Netflix on Alexander the Great, and that word was mentioned that time. Egypt is the food basket of the world. I watched another documentary about the British invasion, where they used to say it is the dynasty where the sun never sets on the British kingdom, and we were occupied by the British for 70 years. They used to call us the basket of food for the British Empire. We have become sucked and very, very focused on become industrialized, that we forgot that our main advantage has been in agriculture. We need to start building on what we have, which is our advantage in agriculture, use the new technologies in agriculture to start building back to what we were.
This is
The
exactly
food basket of the
what
world.
was said today. I didn't want to mention that because, of course, it was said more than once all over the day in our panorama news and on our top stories. But since you said that, today there was an important meeting by where President Abdel Fattah Sisi met with his advisor, or the presidential advisor for urban planning, and the one responsible for the Mustaqbal Misr, or Egypt Future project in the New Delta, speaking about using the latest techniques in irrigation and land reclamation,
This is the
and
only
taking
way.
into consideration food security.
This is the only way. If we cannot
But
feed
we have
ourselves,
two pillars, sir. I mean, of course, agriculture is a main one, but the two pillars, and I wanted to go to another issue, or another file which we are going to discuss today. It's the tour of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli in the tent of Ramadan factories, and just speaking that direct with the investors to eliminate all obstacles on the way, because simply to give the industrial sector the needed care or keenness to improve it, I think it's also vital.
it's not vital, it is the only way. Because if you think about it, moving to capitalism and what we've been trying to do for several years is always based on the private sector. Economies do not grow except with the private sector. And allowing the private sector to grow, to partnership with the governmental sector, it is very, very important to make sure that we can expand the Egyptian economy. Egyptian economy will not grow unless we start allowing the private sector to take a big role. And the private sector needs a boost of trust, because for many years there has been a problem with the private sector in the Egyptian economy. For example, simple choices of not allowing importation. When we had the foreign currency crisis, first decision was always by the government to stop importation. Then we discovered that the majority of what we import is food, so we cannot stop importing, or products or parts that are needed for import and then to be exported. So when you stop that, you are stopping exportation. And when you stop exportation, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that creates a major problem in the economy. So we have to be very careful with how we can build trust between the government and the private sector. This is only going to happen by what Dr. Madbouli did, and not just him. All the ministers should go down, talk to people, make sure they understand their problems, because it's very different when you hear about problems and when you get involved with the public, and also when you offer the private sector this trust. I, the Prime Minister, I'm coming down to talk to you. I want to know what's your problems. And not only that, if I go down and talk to the people, I also have to make sure that I resolve their problems.
This is it, to eliminate obstacles on the way, on the ground, immediately.
Of course.
And also, I'm going to repeat that, taking into consideration that negligence is part and parcel of corruption. I mean, simply bureaucracy and negligence, they cannot be separated from corruption. It's part of it.
We, unfortunately, if you're going to talk about fraud and corruption, all of that have become a big part of doing business in Egypt. And the only way to eliminate that is to work on two parallel tracks. One is a long term and one is a short term. The long term is education, education, education again. From the beginning, we start in the schools to teach people ethics. People in the world do not do fraudulent activities, not because someone is watching them, but because their ethical upbringing stops them from doing
Code
this.
of ethics.
Of course. We have lost that in Egypt. So we need to start from the beginning with our kids, kindergarten and school, to bring back ethics. That's the long term. On the short term, we have to have very strong deterrence, prosecution of fraudulent individuals, and not just prosecution, but making sure that people know about it, that these are announced. These are not punishments that happen in the dark, but they happen. We bring the people, they have very, very harsh punishments, because we need to stop that. Otherwise, we have a big problem.
In addition to taking into consideration that you are going to be given money, you are going to be given loans, the banking system is going to do its part or its role, and it's going to introduce not only financial services but also non-financial services, thinking out of the box, innovative ideas, stuff like that, and you are going to have your chance. But your chance, it's not forever. Your chance, it's only for a year, for example, or whatever we agreed upon, and then the chance is going to go to another person if you were not qualified enough or if you did not exert the utmost efforts to make your project a story of success.
However, I completely agree with you about timing.
Yeah.
But this has to also mean that the government has to intervene in the market, because today, if we look at the deposits rate, we're looking at 25 to 30%, what the bank offers the depositors. So if I'm going to take this money and lend it to someone, I need to get from him 30 to 35% to be able to pay back my bank and to pay the depositors. And we all know the reasoning for these high rates is to make sure we stop the demand on dollars.
Yep.
But this has to be a short-term process, because there is no way any business can utilize and pay back 30% per year in interest. We used to have, Dr. Moait had some very, very good programs where they have lowered the interest rate, I think, if I remember correctly, to 11% and 8%. And this is highly needed if we're going to promote industry and agriculture projects, because they will not be able to operate unless they have funds that they can pay for. because I'm availing funds, but at 30%. There's no way industry or agriculture will be able to do that. So we need to avail back to what Dr. Mait had before, these programs of loans that are specialized for projects, agricultural and industrial, at a low interest rate. What we can do to fulfill your argument is we need to make sure that the land is utilized within. I'm not going to offer you land. What we had in the past, and we all know the stories, I'm going to give you land for agriculture or industry, and then you set it down, and then you have compounds.
And tax exemption, all this, and then.
Yes. Yeah. So we need to make sure the financing cost is at a suitable range. We've had that before. And I think Dr. Mait has mentioned in several of the meetings I've heard, is going to go back to these. Because I don't think of any factory or company that can actually pay at 30% interest and so on. So we need to go back to the low interest rates that companies can and startups can utilize.
And sir, if you permit me to implement that on the ground with an example, Suez Canal Economic Zone attracts 127 projects worth $2.8 billion in 9 months. Satisfied with the number or with this sum of money, or still this is a step in a long journey?
You know, I'm very greedy. I look at my country and I think it's worth millions and millions and billions and trillions of dollars. If you look at what we have in terms of natural resources, in terms of 2 seas, a Nile, we have 95% or 92% of our land that's not used yet. We have so much in Egypt that can offer. So I find myself greedy. I will never be happy with any amount. I want more. But it's a very good start. Because a lot of people do not understand what are we trying to do with the Suez Canal. Beside it being a waterway,
navigation route.
Exactly, for ships to go back and forth, saving time, making income for Egypt. This is its primary role. On the other side, around that, we have the ability to build, like other countries have built before us, a major economic, I would say, whole dynasty of economic factories, of free zones, of logistical areas, you name it. Because
maritime industry, you name it.
All what you have now is you're right beside the road of all the ships going back and forth. So you can ship things back and forth. You can get things at very cheap for your production. You can ship out almost at no cost. So it is very important. I think more important than the canal itself is the economic zone around the canal.
What I wanted to focus on here is that we do have the Russian industrial zone in the economic zone, the Chinese industrial zone in the economic zone. So we do have other offers, and we do have other countries who are eager to come and to invest here. I think those countries, they study the situation well before going to do anything, before stepping any step on the ground, meaning that they knew well that they are their money is secured and they are going to benefit from what they are going to do here. This means that we do have a lot to talk about, and it's going to be a win-win situation. Once again, it's not going to be just a project and that's it.
Let me simplify at least my belief.
Yeah.
Anybody, any foreigner who is willing to come and invest in Egypt, number one, studies a lot more than we study.
Sure.
They will never come to Egypt unless they're going to win from coming to Egypt. Number two, I welcome anybody who's going to come and invest in Egypt, something that cannot be moved out. If they're going to build a factory, if they're going to build houses, if they're going to build agricultural land, if they're going to build fisheries, whatever they're going to build, as long as they cannot move it and take it back, it's an additional asset to my country. So I wish and I hope that we have a big sign that says, welcome to foreign investors. Because we have a lot of people here. We're selling the Egyptian land. We're selling for the foreigners. There's so much that's going on that simple people are getting attracted to all of this. So they come and build a factory. They're going to operate on Egyptian soil. They're going to pay customs in Egypt. They're going to pay taxes in Egypt. They're going to pay electricity for Egypt.
They're going to afford job opportunities to Egyptian
I was going to
youth.
say, they're going to build job opportunities.
Yeah.
It's a win-win situation for us. All of this is very important. They're not going to tomorrow take the factory and leave. So it is very important that we understand that these slogans that people who are anti-Egyptians talk about selling Egypt, this doesn't make any sense. Nobody's going to sell a piece of land and take it away and go to Russia or to the US.
And who have the right to?
It is our country. Even the people who are, I had a very interesting discussion with my students in my class a week ago. They're going to privatize the airport. So now people will come in and out of Egypt with no control. Then I started talking to my students, explaining that there's a very difference between operation of an airport from a logistical side and the security that still is going to be Egyptian. Controlling customs and controlling the passport control of who comes in and out is a different story. This is security of Egypt, and this will stay with the Egyptian police and army. But the operation of the airport doesn't need this type of security. We are unable to efficiently operate our assets. Having someone operate for us is not a bad idea. The world, we look at the United Arab Emirates, 800,000 people. If I remember the number correctly, 2 million expats. They're utilizing the expert from all over the world. We need to do that. And we are lucky because, surprisingly, most of the experts are Egyptians. And we were talking before, you go to Saudi, you find Egyptians operating things. You go to UAE, Egyptians started things. We have the experts. We just need to set the correct system. And not to be afraid, because the world is now no more closed countries, but it's all about international trade. And getting the best experts from all over the world to operate the best way. Railways, airports, there are companies specialized.
Sir, the gym.
Anywhere.
The gym, the Grand Egyptian Museum, which is going to be the gift of Egypt to humanity, is operated by a private company.
Yes.
Because simply this private company is capable of doing so. And this is such an example for this close partnership between the public and private sector.
The best place and the best profit sustainable business is private sector, because there's always accountability. Because someone is out there checking for profitability. You go to the public and governmental sectors and there is no accountability. Public money is not accountable for any. So we are now, I think, on the right track. And with the green light offered back by the IMF and hopefully by the other institutions funneling foreign currency into Egypt, we hopefully are going to be able to start the operation of reinventing the Egyptian economy, because it needs a revolution.
But sir, many people are afraid of what we call new fields. I mean, you are going to find people who are going to say, oh, are we capable of investing in the so-called renewable energy, green hydrogen?
Yes.
What's green hydrogen? Is it possible to, and this is only
If we
an
don't,
example, in silicon, in stuff like that?
I'll tell you something. We teach in the university,
Yeah.
and we teach our students that in 50 years, most of the jobs we have now are going to be obsolete. Everything is changing. The world is not only changing, they always said the only constant is change. But the pace of change is very quick. And if we do not keep up with the change, we are going to have a major problem.
And this is something which Egypt is not going to go through. We are not going to permit that to happen. We are moving forward in the right direction for the new Republic Egypt 2030. Sir, I really enjoyed our discussion. And I'm going to leave you with a promise to see you again in more episodes of Money Means Business. Thank you
very much for having me.
We were very much delighted and honored to have with us Dr. Khaled Dahawy, Professor of Accounting, EUC, or American University in Cairo. Thank you very much for being with us. And with all my love, this was Nermeen Abdurrahman. Now it's time to say goodbye and see you in a new episode of Money Means Business, same time only on Nile TV International.